Hello, Mr. Dunaway here. This is Chapter 5, Section 3, and this is a big deal for us. Slope-intercept form of an equation. This is something that's going to be hanging around us for a long time. It begins with understanding how to find the slope. We'll talk about what the intercept part of this phrase means, and the name of the equation that we're learning here, it looks like this, y equals mx plus b, and we'll talk about what that means as we go through the video here and how important this is for you. The first question says, which is not a linear equation? Well, the first one here, this is linear, so I'll just put L for linear because you've got your variable here as a term, as part of that term, and it's to the power of 1. Okay, so linear, okay, linear variable is 1, has to be 1. All right, and you also can't have the variable in the exponent. So that A is linear, and so is B, because you have y is equal to x to the power of 1. So if we graph those lines, if we graph those points that were true of that, it would make a straight line. And C is linear as well. It's okay that it's in the numerator to the power of 1. It cannot be in the denominator. Something weird happens there, but we won't see that for a while. But this is the one right here. This one is the one that is not linear because the variable is the exponent. That would actually make a curve, something like that, and we will actually look at those graphs later this year. For number 2 here, it says put a check in the box if it applies to a linear graph and X if it does not apply. We could also do true false, I think. We'll just do this. Check if it is linear here. So the graph of a linear equation is always a horizontal line. Well, that's not necessarily the case. Okay, so that's really a false because it doesn't have to be horizontal. It does have to be a line, but it does not have to be horizontal for you. The second box says the graph of a linear equation is always a straight line. So that's the check mark, or in other words, that is true. If it's linear, okay, you can see the word line in the word linear there, so it will always make a straight line. And a graph of a linear equation may be shaped like a U. No, it may not. That's false. It has to be a straight line. Whoops, A-L-S-E, that's false. Okay, so as we go down to the vocabulary builder here, this is a pretty important one for us. If you want to highlight that word, or it might be kind of highlighted for you, or underline it, whatever. This is huge that you understand what an intercept is, and we are talking about what we call the y-intercept. Okay, and you're going to have to be able to understand what the y-intercept is and how to find it or recognize it in an equation and in a graph as well. It is the y-coordinate of the point where a graph crosses the y-axis. Okay, so it crosses the y-axis. It's the point where a graph crosses the y-axis. So wherever it hits, so if you have a grid here, x and y, where that's x and that's y, and you have a line, okay, this point right here, that point where it crosses the y-axis, that is the y-intercept. And that point is really important for us because we can use that to identify our line if we also know the slope. That's what this lesson is about. Okay, so intercept is a point where something or something is stopped along the way. So you understand what intercept means. It's like a football interception. Okay, somebody gets in the way of the path of the ball. All right, so that we need to know. When we say y-intercept, we're talking about that. The x-intercept would be that point there, but for us, the y-intercept is more valuable to us. The bottom part of the page, let's skip that. We need to move along and get to the more application stuff there. So if you would turn on over to the back page, here they introduce this form y equals mx plus b. Now take your highlighter or your pen and highlight that point. This is a big deal that you understand what the pieces of this variable mean and the pieces of this equation and how it relates to a graph. Okay, so in slope-intercept form of a line, okay, that's what this is. This is slope-intercept form of a line. Y equals mx plus b. All right. Now right here you have a blank you're supposed to fill in. So this is an example. Y equals 4x plus 6. All right, first of all, notice that the y is isolated on this side. All right, now it has to be, just like it's isolated here. All right, now this is only true if y is all by itself. You have y equals something x plus something. Okay, or that might just be plus 0, so it could be y equals something x. That number, when y is by itself, that's a big deal that you understand. It only is true if y is by itself. The number in front of the x, that will always be the slope of the line. Remember the rise over run that we just did in the previous videos? That will equal that value in the formula. Okay, then you go plus this value here, that value will always be the y-intercept. Okay, so in other words, in this equation, the y-intercept would be the point, okay, the y-intercept would be the point 0, 6, because that would be the point on the y-axis that this line goes through. Like if that's my graph, you'd have 0, 6, you'd have a point, and then you'd know the slope of the line is 4 over 1, so you could graph that up 4 over 1, you could have your line. That's what you're going to be doing. This whole thing is called slope intercept form. Okay, so the m is the slope, and the b represents the value that is the y-intercept. And you have to know that. Okay, the m is slope, b is y-intercept. You're going to have to memorize that or recognize it. As we graph them, hopefully you'll understand it and see why this really makes sense to us. Problem 2 says writing an equation in slope-intercept form. Okay, let's take a look at what they have here. All right, it says, what is an equation of the line? Okay, so you're trying to find an equation of a line that has slope 3 over 2, y-intercept -1. All right, it's actually a pretty simple question if you understand what I just talked about. Okay, slope is the number in front of the x, y-intercept is the number that's added. Okay, and they're showing us right here. Here it is, y equals mx plus b. All right, so x, the number in front of the x, that's the slope. Okay, so that's m. The y-intercept is b. Now you might be wondering, why do they use m and b? It actually goes back to, I believe, the Latin language from early mathematics. So that's just, and we've just always kept it. So the m represents the slope, and that's actually something that will follow you as you move on in your math classes. So m is 3 over 2. Okay, the b is -1, so it's 3 over 2x plus -1. So the equation of the line, here's the answer to this question. The equation of the line in slope-intercept form is y equals 3 over 2x. You can say plus -1, or you could say -1, which is the same thing right there. Okay, that is slope-intercept form. This is a big deal that you can do that. Now, it's pretty simple at the beginning because they're just going to give you the slope, the intercept, and you're going to plug it in. It's going to get harder as we're going to make it more difficult for you to figure out what is the slope and what is the y-intercept, and that's when we'll see if you really have a grasp of what we're talking about here, and that's where it gets pretty challenging for students. So number 3 here, I think what I'd like to do is maybe stop this video here, and then I will continue with the next one at problem number 3.